when you preach the gospel through singing, it's great. So very much love that. Appreciate that very much. Take your Bibles and turn to the book of Proverbs chapter 6, please. Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. I'm going to preach a message this morning. I've given it a title, Pitfalls on the Path, or Sin Makes You Stupid. That's the title I really like, but no. Just want to remind you, we kind of where we're at here in our study of the book of Proverbs as we've been working through the opening chapters of this book. Proverbs chapter 4, Solomon is writing, of course, to his son. It's interesting if you stop and think about it for a second. If you know a little bit of the Old Testament history, you realize that the son that Solomon is likely speaking to here, his name is Rehoboam. And if you stop and think a little bit, if you know anything about Rehoboam, that might kind of make you wonder how well these teachings sunk in or didn't. Someone else said this week, thinking about that, you realize that Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs speaking to his son Rehoboam. And one thing that reminds us is that as parents, what we do matters a whole lot more than what we say. Because Solomon said a lot of very true things, but Solomon's life taught his son maybe more effectively. And unfortunately, we read about Rehoboam. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the book of 1 Kings and read about Rehoboam. And when you do, you'll understand what I mean about how Solomon, what Solomon really taught his son. But anyways, Proverbs chapter 4, as he was teaching his son, we said this a couple weeks ago, Proverbs chapter 4 was all about the way of wisdom. Right? Walking in the way of wisdom. Wisdom is not a one-time decision. It's not something you do once and that's it. Wisdom is a way of life. It is a continuous step by step along this path of the way of wisdom. It involves successive choices made every day, continually living in a certain way according to certain principles of the Word of God. And so at the end of chapter 4, Solomon asks his son to kind of sit down for a little bit of a checkup, right? And he examine himself and examine his life and his body. And of course, he does this whole thing where he goes through the body, the eyes, the ears, the heart, the mouth, the hands and feet, all these things, and kind of saying, let's do a full body examination. Let's see. And then, as often happens, there's a mixing of metaphors because you have almost this physical examination, but then it pivots into this idea of the walk, to keep your path on the way of wisdom. And that's the concern here, right? He's trying to help his son, okay, choose the path of wisdom, choose the path of life, choose the right way to go, but then stay on the path. Now let's evaluate along the way. How are you doing? And have you continued on the path? And where do you need to correct it? And this is the ongoing process. And so I said, last week, as we looked at Proverbs chapter 5, Proverbs 5 is one of the key pitfalls that young people fall into, right? And it's the area of sexual sin. And that's what Proverbs 5 is really focused on, right? Adultery, immorality. And by the way, it's not limited to chapter 5. We addressed it last week in chapter 5. We're going to come back to it again today. Next week, it's going to be the topic again. I think there's something to be said for that. Right? I think Solomon is very, very wise. He understands how serious this problem is, how rampant it is. Kind of ironic when you think about it. Solomon was writing this 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago, young people needed to be warned again and again and again and over about the dangers of immoral sexual relationships. So don't think that 2024, there's something unique about this moment. I'm not saying that we aren't facing different challenges than previous generations or I'm not trying to deny any of the things that are going on in our society today. Understand this, that we are not facing fundamentally anything different than we have always faced. That's actually part of the power of this book, though. It's part of the reason why young people don't listen to their parents, because we have a tendency to think that our parents don't understand anymore how the world works, right? Those things were fine for them in their day. That worked fine back then, not so much today. I got news for you. What Solomon is saying is the wisdom of his father was still good for him. It was still good for his son. And here we are 3,000 years later, and it's still good. In fact, we have the exact same tools, the exact same resources to guide us, protect us, and help us navigate this difficult and sometimes dangerous pathway through life. And they are just as effective today in doing that as they were 3,000 years ago. Right? Because at root, at heart, the problems are the same. Again, granted that the idea of, say, homosexual marriage or transgenderism, along with, body modification and those kind of things, did not exist in Solomon's day, and they wouldn't have been able to comprehend that because it was so foreign to the concept of the way they thought about the world. Right? So, but the root principles, the root issues are exactly the same. Right? And we see that here. So this is an issue. Proverbs chapter 5 is all addressing that. We looked at that last week. It's going to come back to it today. We're going to go look at it again next week. This is a major thing. We're not going to get away from this. But there's other pitfalls. Those aren't the only pitfalls. And so as Solomon is warning his son, as he's talking to his son about wisdom and trying to encourage him to walk in the way of wisdom, he understands that there are other dangers along the way. There are, we live in Wisconsin. We do. You guys, sorry, but I'm sorry. But one of the things we all understand living in Wisconsin is potholes, right? They just appear magically every year, right? As we have this, you guys don't understand this from down in Florida, but or California, San Diego. Come in. You know what rain is, right? Because this stuff falling out of the sky, it's rain. In San Diego, they don't get that, right? So very, very rarely. Anyways, I'm just kidding. I'm giving you a hard time, but we have this, the frost cycle that we have every year, and it produces potholes. Like that's what happens, right? So if you're going down the path, if you're driving down the road, you got to be watching for those things. That's what Solomon is doing. He's telling his son, listen, there's holes in the way. There's places that are going to trip you up. There's places where the trail has maybe washed out. The rain has washed out part of the trail and it's treacherous. Or hey, guess what? By the way, there's an enemy out there. And he loves leaving boulders in the path. He loves strewing rocks along the way because he wants to trip you up. And he knows, right? He's had a lot of experience with this. He knows how to trip you up. I said to you a couple weeks ago that if you and I don't know enough of our hearts to know where we have tendency toward weakness, I guarantee you the enemy does. He knows, and he doesn't fail to put those rocks right where he knows you're going to trip. So just know that. We need to understand it. That's why Solomon is warning his son here. So there's pitfalls along the way here. And there's some pitfalls we need to be aware of. And that's what this chapter is all about. So chapter 6, we're going to address several other pitfalls here. And at first, they're not going to seem to be connected. But I'm going to show you at the end, after we look at them very briefly, I'm going to show you there actually is a connection. And the solution for them is the same. There's a connection and there's a principle then that we can help to learn from this that will help us to know what to do in these situations and how to address each of these unique pitfalls. Okay? So look with me there, Proverbs chapter 6, verse 1. And we'll just read through a portion of it at a time and kind of talk through each one of them, right? So first of all, my son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands and pledged for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, and deliver yourself. For you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself. Plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Now, what is going on here in verses 1 through 5? Well, this is actually a very simple thing, but I want to explain it because the kids here might not understand, okay? So here's the deal, right? Let's imagine this. Titus wants to buy something, but he doesn't have enough money to buy it. He needs $100. That's a lot of money, isn't it? Oh, I see his eyes light up, right? Titus is going to get $100. Now, where's Titus going to get $100? Well, he doesn't have it, and nobody's going to give it to him, all right? But Titus knows that Isabel is good for $100. She's got that in her piggy bank, no problem, right? She is the bank, right? And so he's going to go to her. Now, he's not going to go to her and ask her for the money. But what he's going to do is he is going to go to Izzy and he's going to say, listen, Izzy, here's what I need. I need you to promise. I need you to promise for me to pay the $100 if I don't pay it. Okay? I just want you to back me up. I just want you to promise. I want you to say that you will back me up. Right? So Izzy's going to agree to pay in case Titus can't come up with $100, right? That's the idea here. We call it co-signing, right? That's what he's talking about here. He's talking to his son and he says, you know what you've done? Now, this is an imaginary situation. He uses the word if there at verse 1. If you become surety, he's not saying you've done this, but he's saying, listen, son, I'm telling you about a situation that may happen to you, something you may do. You may agree to pay somebody else's debt. You may co-sign for them. You may agree to be security for someone else's financial obligation. Now, this is interesting when you start looking at this issue of co-signing, especially in the book of Proverbs, because co-signing, it kind of has a mixed bag here a little bit. Right? Because there are places where we have encouragements to do this. Right? The Israelites were to be generous toward one another and offer loans and not charge interest and help each other. There were lots of things like that. Right? But then there's also these circumstances where, boy, Solomon realizes this is a dangerous thing. And so I think it's probably more nuanced, more complicated than just saying you can't ever do this. But what he's saying here is a particular kind of circumstance. He says, listen, you've made this agreement, you've entered into this agreement, you've said that you are going to cover the debt. You're going to be responsible for the debt that somebody else has. That's verse 1. You need to understand something, that you have snared yourself. You have trapped yourself. You have obligated yourself. And that's the language he uses, the idea. In verse 2, he talks about being caught in a snare, being caught in a trap. Verse 5, he talks about being trapped or being like hunted and being snared in a trap. And I think there's probably, we could specifically apply this to the principle of co-signing for loans, but I think it's probably broader than that. I mean, think about this. How many of us like to admit that we've made a really foolish decision with money? See, nobody raised their hand. Nobody likes to admit that. How many of us have, at times, made decisions with money, bought something, gotten into something, and went, oh, that was dumb. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, okay. None of us likes to admit that, right? You don't walk away from the car dealer being like, man, I paid way more than I should have for that car. Let me tell you. No. We want to walk away from that deal saying, man, I got a really good deal. Boy, I was able to really get good terms for that. That's what we want to be able to say. Right? But the reality is sometimes we don't. Right? Sometimes we've made a foolish decision. Sometimes we've gotten ourselves obligated in something, here, financial situation, and we're stuck. Right? So what do we do? Well, he tells his son exactly what to do, right? He says in verse 3 and verse 4, you need to go immediately and get yourself free of this. You need to go immediately and disentangle yourself from this thing. You've obligated yourself. Now is the time, right now, to go and take care of this. Right? Don't sleep. Don't take rest. Don't wait till tomorrow. Go right now. And you make sure to get out of this situation. Do whatever you have to. Deliver yourself. Now, let's continue on, because I want to come back here. There's a principle. Oh, I was going to tell you this. Yeah. The first pitfall here. What do I call it? We'll call this the pitfall of hasty promises. Right? You made a promise to do something. You didn't really think through the implications. You didn't really think through what this was going to mean. But you got yourself on the hook. What do? He says, you better go right now and get off that hook. You can do whatever you can. By the way, the language here is really interesting. In verse 3, it says, go and humble yourself, plead with your friend. But that word plead is really interesting. It actually has the idea of like aggressively pestering them, badgering them would be a good word for it, right? You go and badger your friend until you get out of this. You pester him. It's not a very nice word. It's not like, oh, just say please. It's not even really begging. It's like annoy him until he just gives you, like, okay, fine, okay. That's the idea. Like, don't give up, because this is really serious. And you can even get that, you can get a little sense of that from verse 5, because think about what does a trapped animal do? Right? That gazelle that's been caught by the hunter, or the bird that's been caught by the fowler. I watched a video this week, because social media is great for feeding you really interesting, clever videos. And I watched a video this week of some guys who are noodling for fish. You know what I'm talking about? Right? Where they're using their hand as bait, and then the fish comes up and bites their hand, and then they reach through and they grab them by the gills. And this guy, I don't know what kind of fish it was, and I couldn't find it later to go back, and I wanted to try and identify the fish. I couldn't. It was big. It was almost as big as he was. Right? And he's laying on a dock, and he's reaching over, and this fish comes up and grabs at his hand. He reaches up, and he gets his hand up through the gills. He's got his whole hand up through the gills, and he's pulling this fish up out of the water. And what is the fish doing? It's just, right? Of course not. Whole body of this fish is flipping and flopping and jerking in every direction it can. And he is being just whipped around by this fish. It's a massive fish. He manages to get this thing up out of the water the whole time. And he's got two other people who are coming along trying to grab hold of the fish. And of course, this fish is just, it is moving, it is flipping every direction. Its entire body, every muscle in its body is moving back and forth. Why? It's trying desperately to get free. But you can't. He's got his arm literally up through the gills and out the mouth. He's got his entire arm in there, holding onto this fish. The fish is flopping so hard, it ends up knocking him down. He's laying on the dock. The fish is still flopping away, threatening to pull him over and into the water. And eventually, he lost hold of the fish, and it went gone. See, that's the picture here, though. When you realize that you've made a hasty promise, and you've gotten yourself obligated, you need to be like that fish. It's not like, I'll try once or twice and see what happens. No. It's like, this is life and death struggle. Go and get yourself free. You flip and you flop and you do everything you have to get out of the trap. That's the key. Now, let's keep going. So this is the pitfall of hasty promises. We'll come back here in just a minute. We'll tie it all together. But look at the next section, verse 6. Go to the ant, you sluggard. By the way, sluggard, I love this term. What's a sluggard? A sluggard is a lazy person or someone who is slow moving. So I don't think he's calling his son. I don't think he says. I don't think he thinks that his son is necessarily a sluggard. But maybe Solomon sees the tendency. And if you're a parent, you probably know what I'm talking about. You see the tendency in your child to be slow-moving, to be lazy. Now, okay, let me just, because it's easy for us to point this at others and look at our kids as parents and say, well, my kids have problems with being lazy. But be honest, which of us does not? sometimes, some circumstances in some areas of our life have a tendency to drag our feet, have a tendency to be slow moving, right? To be a sluggard. So I don't want us to point at other people. I want us to think about this for a second, about ourselves. But here's what he says to his son, right? Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? And then hear the voice of the sluggard. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler and your need like an armed man. So here's the second pitfall. The second pitfall is the pitfalls of laziness and leisure. The pitfalls of laziness and leisure. Again, the son here is compared to a sluggard, lazy person, slow-moving. He doesn't want to get up and do anything. Now, it's important because the description here, or the contrast here, what does he do? He compares here to the ant. He says, listen, go to the ant. Go and study the ant. I don't know if you ever watch ants. Generally, we don't. I was doing it the other day. I was sitting out one morning before the kids were up, and I was just sitting out front reading. And I looked down, and I was watching ants carry stuff back and forth along the patio, you know. That's just how boring I am, I guess. But that's what Solomon says to do, right? Go and study the ant. But what do you observe about the ant? You observe that she doesn't have someone watching over her. There's no supervisor going along beside her. No, okay, carry it on. No, keep going. Come on, we're not on time here. Keep moving. There's nobody doing that. There's no coach. There's no supervisor, instructor who is going along and saying, no, nope, it's not break time yet. Keep going. And what does she do? She works. She continues to work all day long. She's diligent. Not only that, but she provides her food in the summer. She gathers in the harvest. This is verse 8. The idea is there is a time of year when you can get food readily and easily. It's available. And what does she do? That's when she works. Why does she do that? What does the ant know? What does the ant know? Winter's coming. Okay. Now, by implication, does the young man know, the young man who's a sluggard, does he know that winter's coming? Well, the implication is no. The implication is the ant is smarter than he is. The ant knows winter's coming. The ant knows that right now is the time when I can get get supplies. Now is the time when I can make hay. Now is the time when I can accomplish something. Now is the time when I can get something done, and I'm going to work for it. Now, in the summer, in the harvest time, when there's food available, that's when I'm going to go do it because I know the winter's coming. And if I don't do this now, I'll have nothing when winter comes. But the sluggard? Sluggard doesn't even think about that. The sluggard is not even really aware that winter is coming, that a time of need, a time of shortage is coming. Because of that, what does the sluggard want to do? The sluggard wants to sleep. Look at what the sluggard says, verse 10. It's just a little sleep, a little slumber. I'm just gonna lie down for a little nap. That's how the sluggard justifies, right? Just a little bit. I'm just gonna take a little bit of time for myself here. I'm just gonna take a little bit of time for leisure, a little bit of time for relaxation. You see, the problem is not that he wants to sleep. Sleep in the book of Proverbs is a good thing. In the Bible in general, God gives us sleep as a gift. Okay? Sleep's not a problem. Leisure's not a problem. Rest is not a problem. The problem is he's resting and sleeping when it is time to work. When there is work to be done and it is time to accomplish something. And so he's more interested in sleep. He's more interested in leisure. He has no concept that winter is coming. And so notice his attitude, verse 11, your poverty is going to come upon you. Your need is going to come. That's winter for the ant. For the sluggard, it's poverty and need. But how is it going to come? It's going to come like a prowler or a robber, a vagabond. Various translations here. In other words, it's going to just all of a sudden come on you. Totally without warning. Except, here's the thing. We all know winter's coming. Why? Because winter comes every year. It shouldn't be without warning. We should never be caught off guard, right? We live in Wisconsin. We should never be surprised when the snow falls, when it gets icy out, when the cold wind blows. That's not unusual. Sometimes that's just July too, but you never know. Usually, though, that means winter's coming. You can feel it. You know what I'm talking about. In the fall, late September, beginning of October, you get one of those just cold, that breeze, and you can feel it. You go, oh, that's different. That's not the cool summer breeze. That's it. We got it. It's coming. And why? Because it happens every year, and you know it. The sluggard doesn't know. He's totally shocked when all of a sudden he has nothing. And again, we've talked about this, but I can't tell you how many times that over the years I've known people who were, how should I put this delicately, had gotten themselves in situations where they were desperately in need. Okay? And they were totally shocked. Couldn't imagine how it happened. No idea. I had a conversation with somebody out here in the parking lot. None of you guys, and not anybody you know, but somebody that came to visit the church. This is years ago. Living in their car. And this person was asking the church for help. And I said, well, you know, we're not averse to helping, but one of the things that we really try to do when we help people is we want to make sure that they're accountable because we want to help people to make good decisions. And so we don't want you to continue to make the mistakes that have got you in the mess you're in. We want to help you make good decisions so you can get out of that. And this person looked at me with a straight face and said, I don't think we made any mistakes. And in my mind, I went, oh, okay. Well, then I don't think we're going to help you because we can't help you because you are a sluggard. You can't imagine it winter. You couldn't imagine. Winter came and shocked you and you didn't know. What's this winter thing? What do you mean? What do you mean the food all goes away? What do you mean the fields are empty? What do you mean there's nothing to eat? You had all these months to gather up the harvest, but you didn't, and now you can't. Now you're shocked. Now you're surprised. See, the ant is never that way. That's the point. Ant is wiser than the sluggard, right? So Solomon is warning his son. I can see this tendency in you, son. Probably I can see this tendency in you because I see it in me. Because I know it. I can see this tendency to be lazy, to prefer leisure. And I'm telling you, winter is coming. It always does. Learn from the ant. Humble yourself. Now let's keep going. Hey, there's another pitfall. Pitfall of pointless living. This is a section you may not put together if you read through this. You may not realize this goes together, but it clearly does. Verse 12 through verse 19. A worthless person. The word there is the word Belial. You might be familiar with that. That's used in the New Testament a couple times. And throughout the Scripture, sometimes the word Belial is used of someone who's worthless, someone who is of no value. A worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eyes. He shuffles his feet. He points with his fingers. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Therefore, his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly, he shall be broken without remedy. These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Now, he's describing here a worthless person, a person whose life has no purpose, no point. Right? This is somebody who just has they're not living for anything. A worthless person. And what is he like? He is perverse with his mouth, so his mouth is filled with perverse, with twisted things. Notice the description in verse 13. He winks with his eyes, shuffles with his feet, points with his fingers. This is the description of his body language. This is somebody who knows how to communicate with his body language, right? This is the kind I imagine this kind of person, and you know somebody like this probably, that you're never really sure if he's serious when he says something because of the look in his eye. or the way that he says something with his mouth, but his body language seems to communicate something different, and you're kind of always uncertain if he really means what he says. Everything that comes out of his mouth is kind of a slick, he could play it off as a joke, and if you say, wait, oh boy, that's really crossing the line. Oh no, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. Right? Wink, wink. And you're not sure. Because this is an unserious person. That's what he's describing here. Somebody who he's not serious about how he's living. He's not concerned with life and with the way that he's walking. But notice what kind of things he does. His heart is perverse. Verse 14. He is constantly devising or imagining ways to do evil. Prophets talk about this. I think as prophet Micah talks about this. People who lie in their bed at night and they think of things to... They lie in bed at night before they go to sleep and they make plans for new evil things they can do tomorrow. That's their life. Okay. He devises evil and wickedness. He sows discord. Oh, this is the kind of person that loves to say things to get other people fighting. Loves to just throw the hand grenade in the room and watch everything just... And then they don't take any responsibility for that. Right? Listen, verse 12, this is a worthless person, a wicked man. Now, this description right here is significant. Calamity is going to come suddenly on him. He says, but why? Why would calamity come suddenly on this person? Well, the reason is very simple. The second half of this, because verse 16 on, because this is somebody who God hates. Everything about this guy God hates. His insincerity, his two-facedness, his duplicity, everything about him is hateful to God. Look at what it says. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination. Abomination is a very strong word. It's a word when you come across in the Old Testament. Abomination, toivah, it means something that is disgusting, something that makes God want to vomit. It's something that absolutely he despises and loathes. What are the things? If you compare these verses, they compare right back to the things we had before. A proud look. Well, he had proud look. The proud look here is haughty eyes. You notice this guy was winking with his eyes in verse 13. Here is described with haughty eyes. A lying tongue. His mouth is perverse, verse 12. He's a lying tongue, verse 17. Hands that shed innocent blood. This guy is constantly devising evil. And he's using his hands to do evil. Verse 13. He has a heart that devises wicked plans. Verse 18, you compare that back with a heart that are devising evil continually. A heart that is perverse. Feet that are swift in running to evil. Again, this guy, you can see that in verse 14, devising evil. These comparisons here. A false witness who speaks lies. Right? This is somebody who is sowing discord. That in verse 14 is also compared to verse 19. He's one that sows discord among brethren. This is the same guy who's being described here. This is something the Lord hates. God hates this. Despises these things. And that's what this man is all about. Because of that, his calamity is going to come. It's going to come suddenly. There's a couple reasons why you'd want to separate yourself from this guy. If you know somebody like this, a couple reasons why you ought to put some distance between yourself and this person. Because his calamity, his destruction is going to come, and it's going to come suddenly, and it's going to be violent. He says he's going to be broken, and there will not be any healing for him. Okay? So I can think of 2 reasons why you don't want to be standing next to this guy. One is because when that calamity comes, you don't want to be in the splash zone. You know what I'm talking about? You don't want any of this falling on you. You don't want to be anywhere near this. When his calamity comes, you don't want to be anywhere near that. This is the judgment of God. God hates this. He's going to pour out judgment on this guy. You don't want to be anywhere near that. The other reason is this is the kind of guy that would throw you under the bus in a second. Because everything about this guy is dishonest. Everything about this guy is slippery. That's the description here. And so, as Solomon is warning his son, he's interestingly here, he doesn't even give him any instruction, and he didn't tell him what to do. It's as if just the observation is enough. You're going to back away from this guy. Not only can I not trust this guy, but God is going to destroy this person completely. I don't want to be anywhere near that. Now that we move into the last section of the chapter, verse 20, the last pitfall here, the pitfall of unlawful sex. Verse 20, my son, keep your father's command and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you awake, they will speak with you. By the way, we'll read the next verse. Sorry. For the commandment is a lamp and the law a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life. This is another appeal to listen to wisdom. It's kind of an introduction here. It's a lengthy introduction because there's one thing he wants to talk about. It'll get to in the next verse. Okay. But all of this is an appeal to listen, to receive wisdom into your heart, right? And where does this wisdom come from? Well, it comes from your mother and your father. It's their command. It's their law. Listen, your parents have told you things that you are to do and not do. Very specific instructions, not suggestions, by the way. These are commands. This is the law of the mother. These are instructions of things you are to do and not to do. And you need to take these to heart. It's not enough for you just to obey. It's not enough for you just to do what mom and dad say. That's not it. You need to take it to heart. It needs to have an impact on how you think, on what you think about, and how you make evaluations. It needs to sink deeply in. That's what he says here. Bind them on your heart. Tie them around your neck. Because they are going to lead you. They are going to protect you when you sleep. They are going to speak to you when you're awake. In other words, it's going to be that voice that guides you, that tells you where to go. Because verse 23, the commandment is a lamp. It's a light. And this is the way of life. Now, why? What is so important here? Verse 24, to keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering tongue of a seductress. Do not lust after her beauty in your heart, nor let her allure you with her eyelids. For by means of a harlot, a man is reduced to a crust of bread, and an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Can a man take fire into his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be seared? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is starving. Yet when he is found, he must restore sevenfold. He may have to give up all the substance of his house. Whoever commits adultery with a woman lacks understanding. He who does so destroys his own soul. Wounds and dishonor he will get, and his reproach will not be wiped away. For jealousy is a husband's fury. Therefore he will not spare on the day of judgment. He will accept no recompense, nor will he be appeased, though you give many gifts. So the pitfall here that he's warning about, appealing to his son to listen and receive wisdom, the pitfall is this adulterous, evil woman. I want to say it again just because I always want to remind you of this. Solomon is writing to his son, so this is from the perspective of a father to his son, so of course he's speaking of the immoral woman. This does not mean that there is no such thing as the immoral man. So if you are a mother and you're speaking to your daughter, you're going to give her the same warning, right? Because men and women both, we need to be paying attention. We need to be wary of the danger here of adultery and of immorality. That's the description here. Now, if you want to understand this whole, we can't go through all the ins and outs of all these verses here, trying to kind of bring this to you as a unit here. But probably the picture that makes the most, that really works the best here is the one that we come to right in the middle of verse 27 and 28. Right? So just focus on that image for a second. If I brought in this morning, if I brought in a big Weber grill and we set it up here in the front, and I filled it with charcoal, and we lit that charcoal and we got that grill going and really got that going. You know how when all the charcoal briquettes are all gray and it's just flames are coming up out of that, and you put your hand over it for 1 Mississippi and you got to pull your hands away because it's 550 degrees, just blasting heat out of there, right? Well, I want you to imagine that, okay? And then we're going to take a pair of tongs and big, thick, insulated glove, and I'm going to pick up one of those coals, and I'm going to bring it to you, and you're going to hold it in your lap. We're going to set it in your lap. We're going to go around the room. We're all going to take turns. You're going to try holding that burning coal in your lap. What's going to happen to you? Yeah, you're going to get burned. And then I say, okay, who wants to volunteer to come on up here? And you're going to climb up. We'll put the stool right next to you. You're going to climb up on the stool, and you're going to step in that grill, and you're going to stand on that pile of burning coals. Anybody want to volunteer for that? You say, Pastor, that is stupid. No one would do that. That is dumb. That is idiotic. Yeah, exactly. And here's what Solomon says. Verse 29, so is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Now, you could say, well, this is just limited to adultery, but I don't think so. Verse 26 suggests to us that this also involves, he's also talking about harlots, so he's talking here about more than just adultery. He's talking about you pursuing after, chasing after illicit sex, sex that doesn't belong to you outside of your marriage. Okay? Here's what it is. It's taking that burning coal of fire and setting it on your lap. It's going to burn you. You cannot do it without it burning you. You cannot get involved in this without it hurting you. There are so many images that he uses here. He pictures this evil woman. And by the way, the descriptions are similar to chapter 5. Remember chapter 5, she has, her lips are dripping with honey and smoother than oil are her words. Well, here she's described as having a flattering tongue in verse 24. It's again, the idea is it's honey sweet with her tongue. She's got beauty, verse 25. Solomon does not pretend that she's not beautiful. She has beauty. She has allure of her eyelids. I think he's talking about makeup. And I don't think makeup like you shouldn't wear makeup. I think he's saying she knows exactly how. She knows exactly how to do herself up, to make herself look good, to make herself look attractive. She has the allure. He's not denying that. But he's saying this. You ever look at a tiger? Hopefully in the zoo, hopefully not like in the street somewhere. You ever look at a tiger though? And they have just a beautiful, beautiful coat. Really. I mean, just God, when he created those creatures, I mean, just beautiful. You watch them moving. You watch footage of them moving and sleek and strong and agile. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Deadly. That's the description, right? Notice what he says. He talks about her, the second part of verse 28, an adulteress will prey upon his life. She is a hunter. I don't know if you're familiar, but sometimes people use the word cougar today, right, to refer to a middle-aged woman who romantically pursues younger men. Well, I think there's something element of the wisdom of Proverbs that ought to make us go, that's a fitting term. It's not flattering at all. Because what does it say? It says she's after your life. She's out to consume you. That's how serious this is. This is a major, major problem. This is a deadly issue. And it's not something someone does to you. The last part of this chapter from verse 30 on, it describes it very plainly. It's not something somebody does to you. It's something you did to yourself. You brought this on yourself. You bring public shame and reproach on yourself because you've engaged in something that no one will forgive. You will bear that shame. You know, our society says, no, there's no shame. in this. There's no shame. We reject, and I'm not necessarily in favor of it, but you're familiar with the novel, The Scarlet Letter? Anybody familiar with that novel? Classic, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Woman commits adultery and she gets to wear a scarlet A, right? Scarlet Letter. Marking her off. Everyone knows what she is now. Our society today says, no, 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 no. In fact, that was really what Nathaniel Hawthorne was doing. He was arguing that that was wrong. All the bad people in that novel are not the woman that commits adultery or the person she commits adultery with. All the bad people in that are the religious people who are saying she's sinned. That's all. Anyways, that's a whole other thing. But that's where our society is today, right? Don't dare call this wrong. Don't say this is sin. No, no, no. It's not bad. It's what you want. You can't help, who you love and all that kind of stuff. Try telling that to the husband of the woman that you commit adultery with. Is he going to say, you can't help who you love? I guess no big deal. Of course not. Of course not. That's what Solomon is saying here. You are doing this to yourself. You are making an enemy of someone who will not forgive you, and you cannot pay them off. You can't bribe them. You can't appease them. You're doing this to yourself. Okay. You fall in this hole, and it's a big fall. Now, I said to you, and I'm going to come back to this. I said to you that there's a principle here, or maybe I'll put two wisdom principles here, okay, that I think tie all these together, actually. Right? So let me just give them to you very quickly because we're out of time. The first principle is this: humble yourself. The reason, humble yourself. Second principle, move quickly to free yourself from foolishness. What did he say to the young man about getting involved in a bad financial deal? Don't go to sleep. Go right now. Move. Humble yourself. Get on your knees and do everything you can to get out of that. Right? Go and admit you made a bad deal. Say, I got to get out of this. I can't afford this. This is going to crush me. It's going to ruin me. There's got to be something I can do. There's got to be a way out. Do that. Humble yourself and go and free yourself. The same principle with respect to laziness. Humble yourself. Take a look at the ant and admit, you know what? You're right. The ant is smarter than I am. I better learn a lesson. I better go right now and take care of the problem. I better get up out of my bed and I better go and get to work. See, the solution is the same. Humble yourself and move quickly to free yourself from foolishness. Recognize that you are, recognize that you become mixed up with a worthless person, a person who lives with no thought for their life, no thought for what's coming next, no thought for the judgment of God, no thought for the things God cares about. Recognize that. See the problem. Humble yourself and move quickly to free yourself from that. Don't put yourself in a position to suffer judgment and destruction because you keep on living this way or you keep living with people who are like this. And of course, the same thing is true when it comes to the adulterous woman. But the solution here is the same. Humble yourself. Listen. Right? That's what verses 20 through 23 are all about. Listen to your father's commandments. Listen to your mother's law because it will be life to you. You can preemptively deliver yourself from this if you'll listen, if you'll take to heart your parents' instruction. Problem is, we don't want to humble ourselves. We don't want to admit that we've made a wrong decision. We don't want to admit that we've gone the wrong way. We don't want to admit that we are the problem. And because we won't humble ourselves, there's nothing we can do to free ourselves from the situation. Because we won't even admit that there's a problem. And so we're stuck. Let me make one more application of this and then we'll be done. I got to say this, but if you realize today that you are a sinner, that you've sinned against God, that God has reason to judge you and condemn you and cast you away from Him into hell for all of eternity. If you realize that that's true, then you're in the same position as anybody who's fallen into one of these 4 pitfalls here today. And here's what you have to do. You need to humble yourself. You need to admit that you have sinned. Admit that you have gone astray. Admit that you have done wrong and you've brought judgment on yourself. And then go quickly. Go immediately. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't go to sleep tonight. Don't leave this room today. Don't move from your spot, but go right now to the Lord and free yourself. Because He offers pardon. He offers freedom and hope. He offers forgiveness. The problem is, sometimes we just are too arrogant. I remember a friend of mine years ago was dying of cancer. I asked him if he would study the Bible with me. I asked him if he would let me talk to him about the Lord. And he said, no, I've lived my whole life without God. I'm not going to be a hypocrite now. The problem is he was refused to humble himself. And as a result, wouldn't even consider the Lord. Will you humble yourself? Confess that you're a sinner. And move now, immediately, before it's too late, to be delivered from the consequences of your sin. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the boldness of the Word of God. The book of Proverbs is so in your face about a lot of things. It doesn't hem and haw, it doesn't beat around the bush. It just gives it to us plainly. Thank you for that. Thank you for revealing the truth to us in such a clear form. The reality is, if we try to live our own life, try to live the path of wisdom, try to do what's right and what's wise on our own, we'll fail. We don't have the strength in us to do it. We don't have the ability. We don't have the righteousness in us to do it. Well, but I pray that you would bring us to that point where we have completely humbled ourselves. We fall on our face before you and we simply confess, I can't do it. Lord, I need you. And that brings us right to Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The place where we start is the place where we have to come back to each and every day. It's the place we have to finish. It's on our knees before you. Confessing that we are sinners, confessing that we are weak, confessing that we are foolish, confessing that we have gone wrong, confessing that we have gone astray, and asking forgiveness, asking pardon, asking rescue. Oh Lord, I pray right now you would turn our hearts to you. Help us. Help us to confess our sin. Help us to trust in you, to walk in the way of wisdom.